By the 9 and 4, welcome to the library. Today we shall continue our exploration into the gods of the realms by covering in brief the general structure of the mortal gods, their hierarchy, and a bit of their history that led it to being the way it is. In this, the second entry of our Divine Discussions, an Intro to the Realms mini-series. As I have and will continue to state, these entries are only primers and introductions to these subjects, with more detailed entries to come in future. To begin, it should be noted that the term mortal gods refers more to the fact that the vast number of them, or their progenitors, were simply once mortals who were elevated to divine status. As many of the elevated did go on to have their own children, while being born divine, those children were raised with all the drive and impatience of a mortal, along with the certain knowledge that even as divines, they could still die, as the slaying of a divine is what earned many of them their elevations in the first place. Mortal gods, indeed. Of course, that is getting a bit ahead of ourselves. Let us start with the situations that gave rise to the first of the mortal gods. A trio that in the current day are all but forgotten to all but the most astute of historical examiners, for they have been overshadowed by those that followed, and finished the job they started. These three were simply known as the heroes, and they were the first to rise to the challenge of the Daemon Vanson. And they did not meet with failure. For hundreds, if not thousands of years, ever since he had been loosed on the world by the Analar, Vanson had rained destruction and terror across the planet, with very, very few places that were able to resist with any real success. Among them was Evelyn, which, in the history of the realms, has never fallen to an outside invasion. However, eventually the three heroes emerged, one from each of the formerly largest nations of Jamamar: the elves of Avalin, the dwarves of Undergate, and the now displaced and scattered, flame-forged humans of Domnitra. They were Camille Starlight, Vapor Kaesk, and Monroe Price, a scribe of the Royal Library of Daystar, a talented crystal culturalist, and the fallen emperor of the now scattered Domnitra. When they defeated Vanson and sealed him in a place beyond time, space, and reality, they were elevated into the first new gods since the creation of the realms. After their success, they traveled Jamamar, using their newfound powers to set things right, as so many things had gone terribly wrong during Vanson's reign. However, after about a century or two, the heroes left to their godly realms and rewards. For the next several millennia, Jamamar went about recovering and re-establishing some sort of order and culture, the heroes rarely, if ever, being recorded as re-emerging beyond just rumor. Eventually, thousands of years later, dark forces began to move in the world in a concerted, coordinated manner. Vanson was at last making his move to return to Jamamar. Before he could enact this plan, however, a group of adventurers from across Jamamar intervened. At first they were just finding relics and discovering lost secrets to Jamamar before Vanson's reign. By the time they faced the Dark Wa, Analar's slaves to Vanson's will, friends had been lost, and a child had been born and grown to become the first Time Walker since the Wars of Feather and Scale. These assembled adventurers prevailed against the Dark Wa and their master, thus becoming the Valors, first of the V's. They were Genevieve Nodoker, an elven bard, her husband, Corin Skychild, a Kristan warrior, their child, Damastus, a psionicist, and his brother Micah, who was just an infant at the time. Along them was Trinity, the halfling rogue. Further on, the Dragwalk princes of Blade and Chain would later be elevated in recognition of their vast time spent with the V's during their fight against Vanson. He would be elevated to a Valor. A few generations later, Dark Wall survivors were discovered to be yet again trying to return the world to chaos and Vanson's reign. Once more, mortals rose to play their part in the destruction of these plans, and were similarly rewarded with godhood, joining those that already fought alongside them as the Voids. The second of the V's, Exedius Windwalker, a druid, Bodyknock Longtool, a gnomish mage, Thanix and his son Kelix, Manaree Warrior and Bardic Prodigy, respectively, Ashtara Nodokere, daughter to Genevieve, as well as Dranton, the greater wormwood that allowed Thanix to use him as a mount. These are the Voids. Further on, but in less time than before, Vanson's specter once more attempted to return, as if in desperation. In hindsight, a sign of how Vanson was running out of ways to extend his foul existence. This time he was not met by heroes, no noble-blooded champions or divine-blessed avatars. No, the beings that rose to defeat the ploys and themselves become gods and known as the victors were nothing short of evil, selfish, greedy, and most importantly, effective. Of all the groups of the V's, this is the only one that is nearly passed from time. A steward god, Kalor, is the only one to mark that they existed. They were Beathanatus de Tormentave, a demonic general from Chaos Depths, Pure Evil, a self-absorbed vampire and eventual god king of the necropolis, Samara, a demon of passion and lust from the Abyssian depths of chaos, and rounding things out, the alien warrior known as Kagat. All since their elevation to godhood have either fallen or otherwise met with foul ends by their many, many enemies. In what is commonly considered the last true risk of Vanson's return, a plot and ploy that bent the very fabric of reality and time to bring about his attempt. The youngest of the V's answered this call, with descendants of the gods amongst their number and the full interest of the rest of the pantheon in them. This group of mortal heroes managed to, for all time, shatter the being that was Vanson, ending his threat to the realms. Thus, they were named the Vanquishers, and counted amongst their number Nox Sinon, elven mage and rediscoverer of the celestial energy of void, Arya Nodokere, elven sorceress and daughter to Genevieve and Nox, Justina Nodokere, daughter of Ashtara, Roth Moonflower, a wood elf druid, Renly Foth, half-elf sniper and special operations agent, and Karthus Skychild, son of Damastus, and a master Kriston pistolier and engineer, amongst others whose names have sadly faded from history. The Vanquishers, along with the other V, set about advancing their own efforts to helping guide the realms forward after the defeat of Vanson, with many of these plans running at cross purposes to each other or even contradictions. However, as more gods were born, discovered, or even elevated, Her Majesty Genevieve set the Divine Court into being. This gave the Divine a system of organization and governance they had lacked before, while securing Her Majesty's power base. A foregone conclusion to most, as it has often been speculated that only the Nine Wings, or perhaps Damastus, could stop Her Majesty should she actually desire to bring destruction herself. With the V's serving as the backbone of this divine court and Her Majesty at the head, this court would serve well to manage the divine efforts and affairs of the realms until the current day. When the War of Sparks came, however, the court had not yet been established. The material and ethereal deities had rose to bring the mortal gods to heel, who they saw as upstarts and undeserving of the power they wielded. They failed, were slain, and in the aftermath, both the court of the gods, as well as strict rules regarding the conduct of the gods, was established. Since that time, the V's have served both as cord to this divine court, as well as the central pantheon of the realms. Divinities that are not V's are many, and they hold high places within the divine power structure, with many granted stewardship over a star system or a larger area, a mark of trust as the realms grow further out. With this massively simplified explanation completed, hopefully you have a little bit better understanding of some of the foundations that the gods act from. Of course, a deeper exploration into each of these groups or individuals will be in the future. But with this framework laid out, we can continue our exploration in a bit more detail in our next episode of Divine Discussions, an Intro to the Realms mini-series. Thank you as always for your attention and your time. Until your next visit to the library, by the 9 and 4, be well, take care of yourselves and each other.